Good evening, folks, and welcome to Infowars Nightly News on this Thursday, March the 1st edition, with me, your host, Paul Joseph Watson. And straight to our top headline tonight out of The Telegraph, conservative US blogger Andrew Breitbart dies. The conservative American journalist, author, and blogger Andrew Breitbart died in Los Angeles of natural causes on Thursday morning, according to an announcement posted on his big journalism website. He was 43 years old. He reveled in baiting the left and President Barack Obama in particular, who he described in a New York Times magazine piece as a, quote, Marxist. He strongly championed the Tea Party, whose fortunes rose with his after Mr. Obama's election in late 2008. And of course, as most of you will know, Andrew Breitbart rose to prominence by way of his work with Matt Drudge over at drudgereport.com, and he became one of the biggest thorns, certainly, in the side of the leftist establishment. And of course, he also became renowned for his energy and fervor, which he used to argue his political corner with leftist media elites and Obamanoid supporters, which is why his untimely death has come as such a shock to many in the media. And it's another reminder of our mortality. For someone to die who was obviously relatively young. But in a related story that we've got on Infowars.com, will damning Obama footage still be released after Breitbart's death? Breitbart's untimely death has shocked the media world and left some to question whether or not damning footage of Obama in his youth, which Breitbart announced he had obtained only last month, will still be released. We report on Infowars.com today. According to some observers, the footage threatened to sink Obama's 2012 re-election campaign. And this is what Breitbart said in this infamous speech, which he only made last month, which we're going to play in a minute here. Quote, I've got video from his college days to show you why radical division and class warfare are central to what Hope and Change was sold in 2008. The videos are going to come out, Breitbart said. And he basically talks about having this footage of Obama hanging around with, quote, a bunch of silver ponytails, referring to Bill and Bernardine Dorm, who, of course, were in the Weather Underground domestic terrorist group who bombed the Pentagon State Department back in the 70s. And if you know anything about Barack Obama's history, you'll know that his entire political career was basically a vehicle through which these Marxists, these Weather Underground people, radicals, used him to put their mouthpiece in the White House. And there's also a lot of evidence to suggest, in fact, that Obama's book was written by Bill Ayers, who was obviously the leader of the Weather Underground terrorist organization. So these are the people who helped launch Barack Obama's political career. And Breitbart comes out just less than a month ago and says he's got video of Obama palling around with them when he was in college. And he threatens to release it during this speech. Obviously, that's going to have a major impact on Obama's re-election campaign. And so it remains to be seen whether that footage will come out. Mancow Muller, who, of course, is a friend of this show, and a big radio host over in Chicago, tweets today regarding Breitbart's death, quote, he told me recently he had big dirt on Obama. Many believe it's murder. That's what Mancow Muller says in his tweet today. So, I mean, details surrounding the circumstances of his death remain sketchy. We're told there's going to be an autopsy. His family is saying he had heart problems and he just collapsed. So, you know, there could have been some dangerous pharmaceuticals that he took that contributed to his death. We just don't know. The details are yet to come out. But it remains to be seen whether this damning Obama footage will ever emerge. And if it doesn't, serious questions need to be asked. So let's roll that footage now of Breitbart talking about this film of Obama palling around with Weather Underground terrorists.
And so what do we get now in Barack Obama? Well, I've got videos, by the way. This election, we're going to vet him. I've got videos. This election, we're going to vet him from his college days to show you why racial division and class warfare are central to what Hope and Change was sold in 2008. The videos are going to come out. The narrative is going to come out that Barack Obama met a bunch of silver ponytails back in the 1980s, like Bill and Bernadine Dorn, who, equally radical, said one day we're going to have the presidency, and the rest of us slept while they plotted and they plotted and they plotted, and they oversaw hundreds of millions of dollars in the Annenberg Challenge, and they had real money from real capitalists.
Moving on to the next story on Infowars Nightly News, Google privacy changes March the 1st, how to clear your search history account information, out of the Washington Post. The first and easiest way to use Google but keep the company from collecting information on you is to use the company's services without signing into your account, explains this article. YouTube, search, and maps don't require users to be logged in to use the services, though even signed out users will still see ads based on their search terms, etc. And if you go to this article, it tells you how to, first of all, delete everything Google's collected about you and prevent them from accessing it in future with the announcement of these privacy changes, which is basically every web search that you perform and every other action that you take on the internet is going to be catalogued and shared by Google across its platform of services, so you can be bombarded with tailored ads. And of course, it also came out a couple of years ago that they're literally reading your emails if you use Gmail, again, to target you with personalized ads. And these privacy changes are, in fact, illegal in Europe, and that's why there's so much controversy about them. But you can go click through to that article and find out how to protect yourself against this invasion of your privacy. Is the controversy going to stop people from using Google's services? Well, don't hold your breath. Next story. Hillary Clinton admits US and Al-Qaeda on the same side in Syria. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton has admitted that Al-Qaeda and other groups on the State Department's terror list are on the same side as the United States in Syria, and that they are aiding opposition rebels. In an interview with BBC News, Clinton states, quote, "We have a very dangerous set of actors in the region, Al-Qaeda, Hamas, and those who are on our terrorist list, to be sure, claiming to support the opposition in Syria." So let's go to that BBC News clip now.
We have a very dangerous set of actors in the region, Al-Qaeda, Hamas, and those who are on our terrorist list, to be sure, claiming to support the opposition.
So there you have it, confirmation from the mouth of the warmonger Hillary Clinton herself. Hillary admits what we knew all along, just like in Libya, where after the glorious humanitarian intervention sold by the global establishment media, the country which had the highest standard of living on the entire continent is now a civil war-torn hellhole where anyone who these gang of rebels don't like is tortured and carted off to a concentration camp. Just like in Libya, the Al-Qaeda terrorists that served the US military-industrial complex so well in Afghanistan, Bosnia, and Serbia are back on the scene in Syria after, of course, having been airlifted there by NATO and US forces. And they're now carrying out terrorist bombings on behalf of the opposition rebels in Syria, which the corporate media still continues to describe as, quote, innocent demonstrators, even as they are photographed carrying around rocket-propelled grenades. So imagine if a bunch of Tea Partiers went down to the White House carrying rocket-propelled grenades. Do you think the media would describe them as innocent protesters? What do you think would happen to them? Of course, they'd have their heads blown off by snipers in a heartbeat. But the rebels in Syria, who are doing very much the same thing, publicly backed by Al-Qaeda terrorists, as Hillary Clinton just admitted, they're the good guys. Let's just gloss over the annoying little fact that the Arab League report said there was indiscriminate violence on both sides of the equation and that this was a civil war. And let's just concentrate, on Syria Danny, who's on CNN again for the 21st day running, begging for a US military intervention because it certainly helped those black folks in Libya who are now being bulldozed into a landfill, didn't it? It was a glorious humanitarian intervention there. And now, in addition, we've got reports that rebel leaders are running around bragging to the news agencies that the US and France are handing them anti-aircraft missiles. But according to David Cameron and William Hague, we're not arming anyone, even as British special forces have been on the ground for weeks directing rebel and al-Qaeda forces in Syria, as well as thousands of US troops training these rebels on the borders around the country. And, you know, they want these final two dominoes. They need Syria and Iran to fall, and they're next on the chopping block. So the only way to prevent it is for Russia and China, as we've seen with the UN failure to obtain the resolution, is for them to back up their tough talk with some genuine action, which is not likely. And if it does happen, it will only create more chaos on a global scale. So again, Hillary Clinton admits that the US and al-Qaeda are in league once again. Moving on to our next story, shifting back to domestic matters now. Media Matters boss paid former partner 850 grand blackmail settlement. Media Matters chief David Brock said paid a former domestic partner $850,000 after being threatened with damaging information involving the organization's donors and the IRS. A deal that Brock later characterized as a blackmail payment, according to legal documents obtained by FoxNews.com. Brock, 49, heads the nonprofit Media Matters for America, which bills itself as a watchdog of the conservative media, but has recently come under fire for allegedly coordinating with Democrats in what could be seen as a violation of its tax-exempt status. So more dirt coming out on Media Matters. They're on the ropes once again. Of course, Media Matters routinely targets Infowars and Alex Jones for character assassinations and smear attacks. We had the big investigation by the Daily Caller last month, which confirmed what we've been reporting for years, which is the fact that Media Matters is little more than a propaganda front group for the Obama White House. Regular meetings, conference calls with White House officials, and then, of course, you have the $1 million donation from George Soros himself. So Media Matters is basically an attack dog whose sole purpose is to intimidate television networks and radio networks into firing anyone that stands up to the Obama administration or the globalists in any way. Glenn Beck, Andrew Napolitano, Pat Buchanan, all attacked by Media Matters, all now off the air, certainly on mainstream television. As I said, they routinely attack Ron Paul. They routinely attack our operation, Alex Jones, Infowars. But unfortunately for Media Matters, their influence is rapidly declining. Their website traffic, as was revealed by the Daily Caller investigation, gets weaker and weaker every month. Infowars.com completely creams MediaMatters.org when it comes to readership. So now, in the aftermath of this Daily Caller investigation, they're basically in terminal decline. They've been completely exposed for what they are, which is an Obamanoid mouthpiece, a front for the White House. And it certainly goes a long way to squashing their credibility, which they claim to be a non-partisan alternative media organization. That's been shot to pieces. And before too long, I think it'll come to the stage where Media Matters no longer matters. Next story on Infowars Nightly News. Corporate media officially stops covering Paul campaign. GOP presidential candidate Ron Paul and his supporters have long complained that the establishment media deliberately operates a blackout when it comes to Paul's campaign, a claim that has been verified time and time again. Of course, you had the infamous Jon Stewart clip from months ago where he documented that. Now, yet more evidence has emerged that highlights the level to which the media is purposefully sidelining the Libertarian congressman. As Dylan Byers of Politico reports, NBC News is the only media organization that still has a reporter covering Ron Paul full-time. With only 4 candidates remaining in the race for the GOP nomination, with Super Tuesday looming, and with the Republican National Convention just 6 months away, you would think that mainstream media organizations would have dispatched at least one reporter to cover each of the candidates' campaigns. Not so for Ron Paul, however. Quote, "I'm the only dedicated embed consistently covering Ron Paul," NBC's Anthony Terrell has declared. So even as Ron Paul prepares to play a major role in the outcome of the Republican nomination here coming up in a few months' time, of course, with the likelihood of a brokered convention, the media have basically reverted back to type, which was their original position, after all, to ignore Ron Paul altogether, even as he continues to pick up delegates. which leads us to our final story on a related issue, and that is Ron Paul campaign announces new ad buys attacks Romney. That's right, Mitt Romney. The Ron Paul 2012 campaign has announced new ad buys in Washington and Vermont ahead of Super Tuesday and plans to air an ad attacking Mitt Romney, dispelling suggestions that he and Paul are secretly in cahoots. Paul's three-of-a-kind ad is now airing in Washington on the Fox News channel ahead of the Evergreen State Saturday, March 3rd caucus. The 60-second spot exposes the shortcomings of all three of Paul's GOP opponents, with a particular focus on Mitt Romney, labeling him a, quote, flip-flopper who's been on all sides, supported TARP, bailouts, and provided the blueprint for Obamacare. So, of course, over the past 2 weeks, we've had this political stunt, which Lou Rockwell on this show, turns out it was dead right when he called it an establishment trick, to claim that Ron Paul was in cahoots with Mitt Romney because he was, you know, supposedly groveling for this VP slot. First, Ron Paul came out and dismissed that completely, and now he's actually putting out ads attacking Mitt Romney for the big government gun-grabbing Obamacare-supporting socialist that he is. So the establishment neocons and the rest of the media who tried to insinuate that Paul had sold out his supporters by making a deal with the devil, this mythical pact with Mitt Romney, they're going to have to move on to smear number 578 or whatever number we're up to now with the attacks on Ron Paul. So we can officially put that one to bed. Ron Paul is going all the way to the convention as the only anti-establishment candidate, and all those Americans who vote for anyone else, well, they're going to get exactly what they deserve, which is another 4 years of war, police state, fiscal insanity, and the crumbling edifice of America as leader of the free world. Coming up on Infowars Nightly News, Aaron Dykes talks with Foster and Kimberly Gamble from the Procter and Gamble family about their new documentary called Thrive, which is a kind of leftist perspective on the global conspiracy, covers all manner of issues. So Aaron will delve into that with those filmmakers shortly on Infowars Nightly News. Now we're going to go to the quote of the day, which is from none other than Rupert Murdoch, of course, in the news recently. And of course, this is also pertinent in light of Andrew Breitbart's tragic death, because it pertains to the wider media tug of war between Murdoch and Soros on the left. Quote, much of what passes for quality on British television is no more than a reflection of the narrow elite which controls it and has always thought that its tastes were synonymous with quality. Rupert Murdoch, which is why we're all the more thankful that Infowars Nightly News has now actually found its way onto British television on the satellite system on Showcase 2 on Sunday night. So we'll continue in our efforts with your support to expand our territorial gains in the 21st century for the battle of minds in the information war. We're going to go to a break now. Coming up, Aaron Dykes with that fascinating interview. Stay tuned.
One is a serial hypocrite who lobbied for Freddie Mac before the housing crisis and for the individual mandate before Obamacare. Another, a counterfeit conservative who opposes right to work, massively increased spending, and funded Planned Parenthood. Finally, a flip-flopper who's been on all sides, supported TARP bailouts, and provided the blueprint for Obamacare. Three men, one vision, more big government, more mandates, less freedom. One man stands apart, ready to deliver real change, voting against every tax increase and every unbalanced budget every time. A real plan to cut $1 trillion year one and to balance the budget in 3. Pro-life, pro-liberty, guided by faith and principle. Ron Paul, the one who will restore America now.
I'm Ron Paul, and I approve this message.
playing games.
We're going to organize. Humanity's going to come together. We are swinging muskets here, toe-to-toe with the globalists. They're bloodied, we're bloodied. It is absolute, total war.
And we are back from break on the Infowars Nightly News. We're joined now by the two filmmakers of Thrive, which really takes a deep look at what we could do for alternative systems of energy and an altogether reformed system itself, as there's so many problems here on Earth, there's so many potentials, but how do we tap into that and how do we defeat the system that is currently occupying our world and preventing us from reaching that further development? We are joined now by Foster Gamble and his wife Kimberly Gamble, both who put together the film Thrive. Thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for having us on.
So, yeah, certainly appreciate you joining us. There's a whole history of hidden occult technology, suppressed free energy, going back to Tesla and John Worrell Keeley and so many other inventors, probably mostly 100 years ago and even more. And here we are today with our problems just growing and growing. And it seems we're unable to tap into that. We know it has to do with the entrenched interest and the way things have grown up around that issue. So let's kind of lay out the groundwork and then start to talk about what could be done about it.
Great.
Well, you mean in relation to free energy, the key to that area of solutioning, as well as so many others for us, as we lay out in the movie, is an understanding of this toroidal form, this donut-shaped vortex, which is apparently the fundamental shape that sustainable systems must acquire in order to last in a healthy way throughout our universe, you know, from atoms to the clustering of galaxies. So one application of that understanding of kind of the blueprint of enduring healthy systems is that there are numerous inventors, have been for over a century, and maybe way back even to ancient cultures, or who mimic this pattern with various types of materials and then put their technologies into resonance, either rotating at a certain frequency or vibrating at a certain frequency, getting into a certain harmonization of a sequence of magnets and so forth, in such a way that the natural toroidal shape of how energy flows and dances in our universe is mimicked by a device. And then the device, when tuned properly, can actually start pouring out electricity cleanly and safely. So this has been done by numerous inventors. We've been able to be into some of those labs and see them firsthand, and it just moves you to tears when you realize we don't need to be fighting over other people's oil. We don't need to be creating asthma and destroying our atmosphere and so forth. These technologies already exist. However, they are virtually all being brutally suppressed. These laboratories are being raided by SWAT teams. The equipment is being stolen. The patents are being suppressed and so forth. So we're in a political dilemma, kind of where the electric car was, 40 years ago, where now we're seeing the electric cars are finally starting to come out, even though we had them, decades ago. I have no question that we have access to these so-called zero point or radiant, these new energy technologies. Now we've just got to get enough social will, enough financial support behind these inventors to secure their labs and to get these technologies completed and out there so that people have access to them and we can drastically reduce our electric and fuel bills and also have proof that we're living actually in a universe of infinite abundance.
But we've been told progress is about greater centralization of government, but actually this film shows, and all the research I've done shows, that getting independent, getting decentralized, going back to the local, and the idea of having that technology at a personal and community level is really what would give us what I would consider anyway true progress. Your responses to that?
Talk about that at all?
Yeah, well, I think that one of the things that we've done is we really embedded Thrive within a context of solutions, because I think that when people realize that there is so much that they can do on a local level and in their personal lives, it actually allows them to be more open to the information. I know for me, the way this started was that I used to work with abused and homeless kids. And when I did that, I subscribed to various magazines and periodicals all about the state of children in the world. And I could just devour those magazines and then go to work because I felt like there was some impact that I could have on the situation. And as soon as I wasn't doing that work anymore, the periodicals and magazines were still coming, and I couldn't even look at them. I just couldn't take it in. And it really showed me how people need to feel that they can have an impact on a problem to even be able to take in the information about how bad it is. And so what we're finding, like with Thrive and with the work that you do and others, that as people are getting informed, they're also realizing that there's so many solutions, and we've developed this whole solutioning model, and a lot of it has to do with local communities organizing around issues that are relevant to them right there. Certainly that has to do with energy as well.
Right, and we see other problems too, like impoverished parts of Africa or Latin America, where people come with true charitable intentions, bringing technology, but through the divide and conquer model, you've got competing gangs and globalist entities who encourage the wiping out of those villages, suppressing even those kind of solutions.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you know, Aaron, when you were talking about that decentralization, one of the women who's in our film, an evolutionary biologist, Elizabeth Saturas, she says, I think very cleverly, that when you go out into the forest, good luck finding the boss. You know, it's a self-creating symbiotic system. And I think that to whatever degree we even centralize resistance to the centralized system, we're more vulnerable. But what we're thrilled to see happening, and I know that you're seeing this with your vast network as well, that people are creating independent, self-generating Thrive solutions groups in cities, in counties, in states, and in countries all over the world, inspired by the information that they're getting from sources like yours and ours, but then also moving on to use a solutions model that is based on how nature works. This same torus that I was referring to, it has kind of a twin. And for the scientists in the group, it's called the vector equilibrium. And that's kind of how nature structures the material world. So we've come up with a solutions model. I think you have a picture of it, if you can bring it up on your screen. That, first of all, in 3 dimensions, it's called the sector navigator. And we show it in the movie in computer graphics. And there are 12 spheres, what we call representing the sectors of human endeavor. And it's justice and economics and science and media and spirituality and so forth. It really seems to cover all of human endeavor. And in our solutions approach, we invite people in their communities to come together who are inspired to turn things around, then self-identify as to which sector they're drawn to. What are they passionate about? What are they good at? And then to meet in subgroups with people who are in that sector. And then further to identify, okay, am I someone who wants to work on immediate needs? Am I a doctor who wants to go to Africa and work with Doctors Without Borders, or serve food in a soup kitchen or something like that? Or am I someone who would rather work on the systemic level, working on the corruption in the economic system or in the media system or in the governance system and so forth? Or am I someone at the third level who feels talented with helping people expand their worldview, to deepen their knowledge, what we call the consciousness shift? And what we've been finding is that as people find their particular niche and realize that all of the other sectors and the other levels are also going to be being handled by highly skilled and passionate people, there's a sense of profound relaxation where one can go about doing your part in communication with sectors that are doing all of the other parts, but knowing that nobody has to do the whole thing. So this is something that we're really excited about, and seeing just inspire people and help people to organize all over the country and all over the world.
Right. Sorry, go ahead.
I just wanted to say we use that model effectively when we were being sprayed with the light brown apple moth aerial spray assault that happened over Northern California. And the Monterey, Santa Cruz, and Marin counties organized using this model. And within 6 months, a program that was fundamentally funded through Homeland Security, had hundreds of millions of dollars behind it, was shut down in 6 months. And I know through the Freedom of Information Act, when we saw some of the inside correspondence, we saw one email that said that they had anticipated resistance, but they didn't know it would be so well organized. And I think that it really had to do with the fact that, you know, people need to know there's something that they can do about it, but not only that, but that they can do what they're good at and are naturally drawn to, instead of that each person is supposed to have to take on the whole thing, which, you know, you burn out and we can't do. So I think that having seen it and experienced it ourselves and now watching other communities get into it, I'm excited because I feel like more and more people are waking up to what is going on and are ready to engage in these meaningful and localized solutions.
Well, I totally agree, because it's not a question of what we're capable of. It's a question of what aren't we capable of. The system knows that. You've got John D. Rockefeller saying competition is a sin, and you've got this whole model taking, just for instance, the Maslow hierarchy of needs and turning it on its end to keep us in focused on our basic needs so we can't reach those higher levels. And so how do we fight that integrated system? Because they've taken all the major power companies, consolidated them, and integrated those agenda. We were talking earlier about some of the interlocked boards.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because oftentimes people look at the failures of the system and say, oh, the people in charge must be really incompetent or stupid or something. And you know, your programs there have done a good job of actually showing that these people are very shrewd, they're very dedicated, and they got a ton of money in their think tanks. But what they've been doing in their think tanks, obviously, is analyzing, okay, what are all the major sectors of human endeavor, and how can we take them over in order that we can destroy people and destroy so many people's lives, consolidate wealth for ourselves, and then control people. Well, we're doing just the opposite. We're taking the same whole systems approach, realizing that all these sectors fit together, but we're coming at it looking to see how can we empower people at the individual level and then create the new systems. As the old systems are crumbling down, either intentionally or just through their own corruption, as they're coming down, we need to be emerging the new systems that are based on integrity and based on personal freedom, but also where the sectors they're all covered and they're all in touch with one another. So that's why I'm thrilled to see that this same model that works so well in stopping this initiative to spray 7 million people in Northern California for 10 years with poison out of an airplane. That was a George W. Bush Jr. Personal earmark, with $300 million in the first year dedicated to doing this thing, that a group of citizens, especially once the moms got involved and started coming to the demonstrations, you know, with their kids in strollers, basically saying, no way you're going to dump poison on my kids. You know, this model, with all the creativity and expertise that got freed up, was able to stop that whole onslaught in 6 months. And I'm confident that this same sort of model, which is so efficient in organizing people's initiative and creativity like a laser as opposed to just a flashlight, I'm confident that when this sort of organization spreads around the world, that and it already is. I just got back last weekend from sharing this model with a National Occupy Summit up in Olympia. And they were very excited by the organizational implications, because they're dealing with so many different issues and struggling as to how to organize and coordinate them. So it's this sort of activity and just the initiative of just millions and millions of people across the planet waking up right now that actually have me being more confident than I've been in the last 15 years that we can turn this thing around.
Yeah, and I just want to add that, you know, Thrive as a movie is also, you know, we think of it, it's almost like a trailer for the website, thrivemovement.com, where you can explore all of these solution strategies and learn about success stories, as well as see the movie or share it or do any of the research. We have a resource tree there that has all of the books, videos, organizations, and people that we use to get informed. So it's really a resource for people to understand what's happening, but also to realize how much there is going on that is working and how effective people can be once they figure out what's happening and organize with that information. So it's more leveraged in how they're focusing their time and energy. So thrivemovement.com is like the whole other half of the offering.
Right. And I love the questions you bring up in the film, because on the one hand, you've got the level where it's the 99%. You mentioned the Occupy movement. On the other hand, you clearly identify we have to have individual rights. We have to have a respect for documents like the Bill of Rights. That's very important to where we need to go from here. If we leave that behind, we lose it all. Now, I would have turned, I don't want to mean to do a sins of the father thing, but just to make an example of Procter & Gamble, because that's where you come from, we've got a lot of challenges there, too. You've got the Clarence J. Gamble legacy of being part of eugenics and really coercively hurting people. You guys are trying to turn that question around and empower people, which I think is obviously the right question. How do we deal with issues that you have current members of the Procter & Gamble board working with Monsanto, when obviously that's one of our big problems?
Yeah, well, I appreciate the question actually a lot. I like having the chance to address this directly. So let me kind of take those one at a time. First of all, in terms of Clarence Gamble, this is a person that I did meet a few times and actually really enjoyed him a lot. He was one of the most innovative members of the family. And I was shocked when I read David Icke and then saw Endgame to see how he was characterized as someone who was actively and covertly depopulating. Because I know he was associated with the eugenics movement, and that's unfortunate in those times. I communicated with his whole side of the family once I heard these reports and said, is this true that he was involved in any kind of mandatory or covert sterilization? And they said no. As far as any of them knew, he was never himself. In fact, he was a fighter against mandatory sterilization, even though he was very much in favor of spreading the optional birth control and so forth to 30 countries around the world. So I don't know definitively, but that's as best I could find out from the family. But in any case, whatever he was involved in, obviously each one of us is our own human beings, and as we say in the film, there's no more dangerous plot on the planet right now than the elite plot to actively depopulate the planet. And so we're doing everything we can to expose that. So now in relation to Procter & Gamble itself, I personally am very grateful to my ancestor, who was a candle maker and a soap maker, for the legacy that he passed on to me, which is just enough money to spend my life tracking these very questions and then making a film to try to do everything I could about it. But the company itself was one that as I've read about the history, and none of the family members have been involved in the running of the company for several generations, and our stock ownership is so minuscule that we have no financial leverage as such over the company. But we do have a little bit of kind of public leverage, because if a bunch of us come forward as the members of the legacy family against one of their policies, it's embarrassing for them. So we've been able to have some success in coercing them to reduce pollution, and especially to eliminate animal testing. We've gotten them to eliminate over 90% of what they were doing. We're working on the last 5 to 10% of that. And we continue to do what we can. I wish we could do more. I'm no longer proud of that company. I don't use any of their products except an occasional razor blade. They've been unwilling to go into organic foods, and you know, when they cooperate with Monsanto, when they create RFID chips, when Dick Cheney goes on the board in the 90s, you know, for me that was the indication. Okay, they really have, unfortunately, given their size, they have become, at least to some degree, a part of the military-industrial complex, which is so dangerous right now. So I don't have any hesitation about exposing any violations that they create, and I reach out to other members of legacy families to do everything we can in our generations to turn those giant ships away from the kind of centralized control and inappropriate, violating behavior that a lot of them do, and either get rid of them or turn them so that they're actually really serving people on the planet in a healthy way.
Yeah, and I think I want to add, I think one of the things that we feel is that individuals should be prosecuted for the decisions that they make and not be able to hide behind the corporate personhood. So, inquiry needs to be made, and we can tell, clearly Procter & Gamble's involved in some horrible stuff, and the individuals responsible for those decisions, we think should be prosecuted. So, that's part of the whole move here, is that there needs to be some accountability as their structures come down and the people reemerge, which I'm confident will happen. And one of the ways I think is to get this corporate personhood thing out of the way so that the people are actually accountable for the decisions they make, and including investors in those companies. If that's what their money's doing, then there should be accountability there too.
Right.
Yeah, let me mention one more aspect of that, because in our solutions process, our model, it's not just a useful structure, but the other half of it is it needs to be based on healthy principles. And the key principle that we base all of our solutions on is the principle of non-aggression, of the honoring of each person's property, safety, and privacy. So when these companies are doing bad things, not only do they need to be prosecuted, but we can employ the same thing that Gandhi and King did with nonviolent non-participation. We can refuse to buy from these companies. We can refuse to invest in these companies. We can protest against these companies, and we can divest from other companies or organizations or universities or whatever that also invest them in the same way that divestment was so critical to getting rid of apartheid, at least to what degree it has been in South Africa. The same thing can be true for the multinational corporations and the banks in America and across the developed world.
Right, and obviously this was never just about Procter & Gamble. The real problem is that all these major companies have more or less combined into one larger entity. And what I really see as the big problem is the Rockefeller Foundation or the Gates Foundation saying, everybody pool your money with us, we have the answers. But their answers are the harmful GMOs and very questionable, definitely dangerous vaccinations. And that's not the path forward. I do appreciate all the questions you put forward in Thrive. Let me bring this up, too, because the environmental component is something we do want, quote, sustainable energy. At the same time, you've got the world government level, the United Nations and what have you, also addressing those questions. And they've got a real Trojan horse where they want to use the global commons to get a greater power, something that we all are interested in solving, but not the same solution.
Yeah, that's a really critical distinction. I'm glad that you brought that one up, Aaron, because I know a lot of my friends who care deeply about the environment and have been very active for years, have been being severely duped, as I used to be, to think that the Copenhagen conference, for instance, was really about saving the environment rather than a Trojan horse in order to create a global tax and a global government and a global police force to, in fact, control everybody through the control of carbon. And it's the same thing with a lot of people are still being fooled, including here in Santa Cruz, by programs like Agenda 21, where they learn to use all the right words like, equality and sustainability and enduring systems and all that type of thing. But really, if you look at it, under the guise of that, they're stretching the tentacles of the one world government and the super state structure right down into your local communities and taking over your environment, your water, the air, the local systems, the local governments, and so forth, under the guise of taking care of the environment. And we really need to wake up and make a more mature and discerned distinction there before it's too late.
Yeah, and I think it's important to reclaim a lot of that language for ourselves rather than abdicate because they've usurped it. I mean, they had the Clean Air Act. I remember, in our choice in making Thrive, talking about love was like, geez, can we do that? You know, it's like, wait a minute, what happened here? You know, how is it there are these words, whether they have to do with sustainability or clean air or basic human goodness and the capacity that we have to love and care for each other, you know, suddenly those become, you know, risque things to talk about, or we're going to be misunderstood, instead of let's reclaim this and say, yes, we're absolutely for sustainability of a conscious, aware nature that is based in individual freedom.
Right. And so I guess my final question would be this in two parts. A, which free technology energies are the most promising? I've read a lot on these inventors. We get emails about it constantly. I know people out there have looked into this. What's going to be at our homes, on our individual properties in the coming future? The second part is, you could have, you know, theoretically the spaceship with the future civilization and all the answers on board. The problem is I don't see my ticket onto that system because there's effectively a scientific dictatorship in place, and those seats have already been reserved by people who think they own the future.
Yeah, first of all, in terms of the devices, there's a man named Sterling Allen who runs a website called PES Wiki, PES, Pure Energy Systems Wiki. And they really stay on top of what's emerging, at least publicly. There are tons of private, you know, secret labs, because unfortunately there still have to be, where they're not going public until they're really ready. But Sterling does a great job of keeping his top 5 list up to date. And he just got back from South Africa, inspecting a technology over there that might be released, he said, in early March. So it literally could be in the next few weeks. A very exciting technology that could be coming to market right away. There's another one people are hearing about, the Rossi ECAT device, which is a cold fusion device that seems to be holding a lot of promise. I haven't heard anything for a few weeks now, but I'm watching that one pretty closely. John Bedini has got amazing magnetic motors and radiant energy devices. And I know that he could come out with over Unity devices if he was allowed to, and because he had them many years ago. Currently, he doesn't market any over Unity devices because he was told he couldn't. But keep an eye on PES Wiki, and that'll keep you up to date on what's surfacing in the public domain.
That's PES Wiki, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and also we do updates at thrivemovement.com, and there's a lot that you can check out there under the whole free energy solutions.
Yeah, and then in relation to the scientific dictatorship, I think this is a really key point as well, because first of all, technology can really help raise our lifestyle. Technologies like the computers and networks that we're speaking over right now is helping us get informed and get organized like never before. But on the other hand, the technology itself is never going to develop our consciousness for us. It's not going to, we can't turn management of humanity over to computers or to any organization. I think that your point is really critical, because as we go forward, we're absolutely convinced that unless it's on the basis of honoring the sovereignty of every single individual equally, then we're not going to make it, even as a species, because as soon as the seeds of tyranny are sown by giving a few people a monopoly over force and monopoly over money, it leads to tyranny every time. And now with the weaponry that is available, even if we could muster even a violent revolution, I'm not suggesting it, but if it came to that in our own self-defense, it would be disastrous for the planet right now. So to the degree to which we can emerge healthy systems now based on the freedom of each individual and the communication systems that we've got now, I think we've got a really good shot, but we can't turn it over to some sort of elite scientific dictatorship, right, as you say.
Right.
Yeah, and I don't want to leave this planet. And I'm not willing to give that one up. I'll definitely stay. And I think this power of nonviolent non-participation is something that, you know, we saw with Gandhi and we've seen with King. And I think that's really what's emerging here, as people are getting informed and realizing that, you know, this pyramid structure of domination and control while people are at the bottom of it now, impacted completely with all of the effects of it, it also means it relies on us participating. That's where the true power is, in the people. And I have a lot of confidence that we're going to be able to stay on this planet and come up with the solutions that we need. And we do our best to put those out at thrivemovement.com, and appreciate the work that you're doing and so many others.
And yeah, truly, self-governance has rarely been tried at all. Appreciate y'all joining us. Appreciate raising those big questions in the context of identifying the New World Order system and the real problems we face. And so I think everybody does need to see the film and join the conversation and follow it at your website, thrive.org, right?
Thrive Movement.
Thrive Movement.
ThriveMovement.com, and then you have the DVD available at Infowars as well as through our website.
That's right. We have it at Infowars. Kimberly Carter Gamble and Foster Gamble, thank you for joining us. It was a pleasure talking to you.
You're welcome. Thanks, Aaron.
Thank you.
And that's it for the Infowars Nightly News. We'll be back again tomorrow. Stay tuned and help support our broadcast. Consider subscribing, and don't forget to check out the new documentary, New World Order, Blueprint of Mad Men. Thanks.